Greetings and welcome to the pony animation course. Um, so, as an introduction, this course assumes you have no experience whatsoever with Blender. Also, for the people watching live, you can ask questions whenever, but I will probably check them at the end of each subsections. If you have questions that are not relevant to the current subsection, please ask them at the dedicated time at the end of this course. Okay, so if you're here, you want to animate ponies using the Open Pony avatar. So we're going over first the Blender basics. Then we will see how to animate using Avatar and the dev kit. Then we will see tricks to improve and to be a pro expert animator. And finally, we will see what makes an animation a good animation. And then you will have a time to ask questions. Okay, let's start with Blender. So, first thing first, you want to open Blender via the dev kit from the Discord if you're following along. So you should land on something like dev. So you should land on something akin to this. So, the Blender interface. The Blender interface is a little bit obscure, but first we will go over the layout. So assuming you opened the file pony animation full, oh yeah, some people mentioned I should cover how to install AlphaStar. So to install AlphaStar, you go to your Blender, to Edit, Preferences, and then you go to Add-ons. Once you've done that, you must click on Install and find your Avastar compressed file. You open it with your file manager contextual window thingy, and then you search Avastar with the search bar, and it should be activated. You may want to restart your Blender to have the change being accounted for. Okay. So, I'm going to give a little time for the ponies on live to activate their Avastar. Okay, so during the live stream, the recording failed, so I'm re-recording this section for the video version. So, assuming you have Avastar installed and enabled, When you open the file OpenPony animation full, you should land on something like this. Now, you should immediately create a copy of the file by doing save as and whatever name you'd like to keep a clean full copy from the dev kit behind. So your workspace is divided in multiple areas. The main area is your 3D port view. You have 3 of those, here, there, and there. It's where you actually will move your rig and where most of your work will be done. You then have the timeline and dope sheet at the bottom that will let you interact with your keyframe. Those keyframes will also appear in the graph editor here. And finally, you have the outliner that show all of your objects. And you have the property tab, which you won't use a lot for animating. So, that was for the layout. Let's view more in detail the 3D viewport in pose mode. So your 3D viewport has the same internal camera system as Second Life, meaning your camera is centered around an invisible dot in your 3D viewport. You can see it doesn't appear on the recording, but there is a bottom bar on Blender that shows you the actions that mouse clicking will do. So you can rotate your camera by holding middle click. You can shift middle click to pan the dot, and you can alt middle click to displace the dot at a raycast of your current view where you click. The tool side menu here can be shown and hide with T. You won't use it, so I recommend hiding it. And the other side panel can be shown and hide with N. But now let's let it visible. So command controls in Blender. So moving a camera is fine, but you'll need eventually to move your rig. So you can select any part of your rig by clicking on it. And you can do multiple selection by holding Shift and clicking on multiple elements. If you click anywhere, it will deselect your current selection. And you can also box select multiple parts of your rig. When you have a part of your rig selected, let's take the head. When you hit G, you will be able to start moving it around. Then you can do either escape to cancel the movement, or you can click to validate the movement. You can undo with Ctrl plus Z. While you're moving something, holding Shift will let you have more precision over your movement. For even more precision, you can move around, confirm the translation, and then edit the values here. Your viewport has something called orthographic mode. So to enable orthographic mode, you can either press 5 and it will put you in a relative orthographic mode, meaning you will work with a plane. You can leave by hitting 5 again, or you can go into fixed orthographic mode by either hitting the buttons in the top right or the number on the numpad. As you can see, both of your top left and top right viewports are in orthographic mode. The preset orthographic mode are left when you rotate the camera. The advantage of being in orthographic mode is that you can move your model in only the plane you're looking at. So that was for translating. Now for rotating. Rotating is done with R. So when you hit R, you can rotate the bone or eye key around. The rotation will always be using your view vector as an axis. So to demonstrate this, here, there. Excuse me. There we go. So to demonstrate this, here I have a ring which normal vector is aligned with the camera. And as you can see, if I rotate it simply, the ring won't deform, meaning it will rotate around the vector defined by a raycast of my camera. You can, however, hit R again to enter trackball mode that will let you move the ring freely. As with translating, holding Shift will get you more precision. The difference with rotation is that you can you can rotate with increments by holding Control. For both of those transformations, you can lock by a specific global or local axis. So to do that, for example, let's say I want to move the head. If I hit Y, I'm locking with the global Y axis. If I hit Y again, I'm locking with the local Y axis. And if I hit Y once again, it's free movement. When you're moving something, you can instead hit Shift plus the letter, for example, Shift plus X or Shift plus Z, to lock by the plane normal to the axis instead. So for example, if I hit Move, Shift plus Z, you can see I'm locking on the flat plane. In Blender, most of the things you will do are counted as an action, and that means even selection. So for example, here I had the head selected, now I select the ICOG IK, and if I hit Ctrl V, the head is selected again. I select manually the hips, Control V, the head is selected again. With Shift and Control Z, I can redo what I've undone. Okay, so that was how to use Blender basically. Now for actually animating. So, first, let's get familiar with the rig. So the rig is basically all your bones and IKs. So what actually controls your avatar is bones. So when you have this side menu, the end menu open, and you're on the Avatar tab, if you selected any IK, you can enable different bones to show them, right? And so those bones will move your avatar. However, bones are hard to move coherently, so fortunately the rig has been set up with IK for you to move the bones to move the bone in a coherent fashion for you. Note that a bone, for example, here's the torso bone, the chest bone, that is not keyframed. We'll see this, what keyframing is in the following sections. So a bone that is not keyed will not show up, well, will not be moved by the animation. And in Second Life, that means that the other animations will be free to move that bone. On the opposite, a bone that is keyframed, even if it never moves, will be locked by your animation. We'll talk more about this and priorities in the exporting section. If you've used IKs and you move a bone, for example the torso bone, here let's put it like this. When you move the IK, it will move the host structure, keeping the relative new position of the bone. So it won't reset your bone. There are more bones in the avatar than the OpenPony uses. For example, the OpenPony doesn't use the hands bone here, or most of the hin's bone. It uses some of the hin bone though. The origin bone is also an important bone because it lets you move the start of your animation. It shouldn't be the origin bone shouldn't be keyed. Ideally, in practice, you can key it and export and remove the keyframe in order to export it. It's useful to key it when you have multiple actions for animation that have multiple characters with different starting points. So now that we know about the rig, let's set up an action to to make our animation. So, each one of your animations must be an individual action. You can, in theory, have a new Blender file for each animation, but it will quickly get really heavy on your hard drive. So I recommend starting from the T-pose action because, as you can see, it has the torso, leg, and arm already keyed. So what you do is start from the T-pose here. You can click Browse Action and type T-pose to find it. But it should be selected by default. You click here a new action, name it example 1. Oops, example 1. And then you click fake user. So what fake user does is, as your action is not used by any object in Blender, Blender will automatically cull it when you close and save your project. Hitting fake user lets your action be saved, and it lets your action be saved with the project even if it's not attached to anything. So we have the T-pose action, we have our example 1 action. So one thing to note about the T-pose action is that it also has the wings keyed by default. So to prevent wing boners during your animations, what you want to do is show the wings, box select them through the body. You can see all is selected. Click the little dot in summary here that represents the keyframe and hit delete. And when you deselect and reselect here, there shouldn't be any keyframe on the wings. That way the wing HUD will animate the wings while your animation takes care of the rest. If you're making a wing animation, you will want the wing to be keyframed, obviously. On the dope sheet here, or more specifically on the timeline, you can change the scope of your animation. For example, to last 100 frames. And to start at 10. This can let you play only the looping part of your animation, or this can let you make more or less long animations. Something to watch out for is how Blender handles non-keyed bones and IK. So for example, I have this backward action that puts my pony backward, right? But I also have this raise hoof action that raises the hoof, but with the hip bone and the head bone that are not keyed. Not bones, sorry, but IKs that are not keyed. Because I don't need those to raise a hoof. So I go back to raise hoof here. You can see all my hooves get into the correct position, but my hips and head are not moving because they are not keyed in the new action. So they must be keyed in the new action in order to go to their quote-unquote normal position. To circumvent that, you can simply transit by T-pose and then select the raise hoof, because my raise hoof was done with T-pose as a basis. This is more or less an absurd example because you will always key head and hips. It was to show you that if you don't key a bone or an IK, it won't go to its normal position when you switch to your action. Oh, and the recording stopped. Let's start recording anew. Switching actions. An important note is when switching actions. So here I have an action that puts my pony backward, that has all those bone keys. So when you switch an action, all the bones and IK that don't have a keyframe, we will see a keyframe just after. But all those that don't have one will be ignored in the new position of your pony. So for example, I have a raise hoof here where I don't have the head and the ICOG bone keyed. So let's go to the raise hoof action, and as you can see, my legs are still keyed, but as there was no keyframe here or there, they kept their position on the backward action. So a simple workaround is to transit by the T-pose each time. Okay, do you have any question? How do I switch action? You click the little action button here, and then you look for the action you want. Don't try to look for backward and raise hoof. They have they are custom made for the purpose of this class. Back to the PTSD presentation. Next, keyframes. So I mentioned keyframes once or twice, but let's see what they really are. So, what keyframes are is the essence of your animation. Keyframes basically tell the software, I want this there now. They help you not having to animate every single animate every single frame like someone working in 2D animation would have to. So what keyframe will do is make the computer calculate the path to your keyframe. To insert a keyframe, first you need to move around an IK. Then when you're satisfied with the new position, you hit I and then T. Or you can also right-click, insert keyframe, and location and rotation. You can see you have a lot of options to insert keyframes, but know that inserting anything but location, rotation, or location and rotation will probably break your animation. So you've moved your head, but you want to insert keyframe at different point in time. So to do this, you can drag this little timeline here, put it, let's say, at 40, and then you can rotate it to insert another keyframe, and then the computer will calculate the path to your second keyframe. No stable context info for keying set. Okay. A note about poses. It's that so you see there you have your headbang keyframe. If you move your head another way and you don't key that new position, if you move your timeline, it will default to the calculated position if you don't have any key for your new position. We'll see what it entails and how to work around this in a later section. Yes, a note about auto keying. Do not, in any circumstances, auto key. Ever. Ever. One, because it doesn't let you fine-tune your poses. And secondly, because as you can see, let's put an automatic keyframe for like looking inside your body. As you can see, the auto keyframe keys the scale here. And you don't want to key the scale when moving your rig, unless you want to make Eldritch Abomination kind of animations. So yeah, don't use auto keying. So yeah. So if you don't see any keyframe here, it's because your view has panned down. What you can do is either middle click to pan the view back up until you see summary, or you can hit begin on your keyboard to automatically adjust the view to your set keyframe, or it's the basically automatic make my view nice. It will it will center around all your keyframes. It works in the graph editor too. Let's move along. So, now that we know about keyframes, now that we know about keyframes, And assuming we made our headbang animation, we want to export it. So, to export an animation, what you want to do is go to use a property window, go in the render category, and scroll until you see animation export. Note that to have this at all, you must have a part of your rig selected. So you want to export as an anim file. You don't touch the FPS. Your start frame and end frame are synchronized with this view here. So if you, for example, modified your end frame in the timeline to 100, it will reflect here. So you won't have to worry about it here or there. You can uncheck this box to desynchronize the two, but it's not recommended. So in the options, you have ease in and ease out is basically a smooth slide from the current position of the avatar to your animation, and vice versa. Note that the ease in and ease out will hit on the time of your animation. So if you have a too big ease in, for let's say 1 second, it will take the frame 0 to 60 to ease in the position of your animation, meaning that all your frames before 60 will be played approximatively, and that you should start your animation at 60. You can have a smooth ease-in by just starting animation later. The priority of the animation, the priority of this animation is how it will layer. The long and the short of it is that a higher priority on the same bone will overwrite a lesser priority. If both animations playing have the same priority, the last animation playing will take precedence. There is a documentation in the official dev Discord. You just go to the documentation and reference channel and hit Control F and search for priority. The compression will dumb down your animation slightly in order to lower the size. The loop animation checkbox will tell what frame to loop your animation at. So for example here, it will loop from 0 to 40. You can have a non-looping animation by dechecking. Note that every frame to 60. Note that every frame outside the loop timer, and by that I mean every frame after it, will only count for the ease out. However, all the frame before the loop can let you do a setup of your animation before entering a loop. And then you can export your animation with the export button. You wait until it's done, and it's done. Okay, that was for exportation. Any questions? Okay, don't see question. Let's move along. Okay. So now that we know how to export, let's find out how to make the tricks to make an animation. So first trick is pause buffering. So what is pause buffering? Let me bring up Blender again. Yeah, I have. Okay. So here I have an animation that starts at 0, ends at 240. So let's say I've made a very quick breathing animation. You can see my pony is slightly breathing. Okay, that's all great and good. And let's say I want to insert a keyframe where the pony hiccups, so a slight move up. Right. So if I do this like that, but I told myself that I wanted the slight move up not to be on frame 192, but on frame let's say 180. You can see that moving along the timeline has erased my change. So when you have your change at frame 192, what you can do is hit Control C or right-click Copy Pose to copy the pose of your selected bones. Go to frame 180 and paste it to the correct frame. This is a useful trick because, for example, I want movement to be relative to the base position. I adjust it at the base position, I copy the pose, and I paste it. About keyframe, there is a question coming up. That doesn't work for me. You must have a bone selected, an IQ selected, move it around, copying it with Control C. Your mouse must be in your port view when you copy. Move your frame and paste it. If you deselect so that was to copy and paste poses. What you can do also is duplicate keyframes. So let's say I'm selecting here the keyframe for my head in my breathing animation. So I can demonstrate that on the example we made. So let's say I'm selecting here the initial keyframe. With my mouse in the dope sheet, what I can do is Shift and D to duplicate my keyframe, and let's drop it at 20. And so the keyframe will hold until 20 because it's the same animation calculated, and then it will compute towards the frame we put at 40. You can duplicate whole groups or of frames. You can also duplicate the frame to the end frame, and so we have a perfect loop. Okay. Any trouble with duplication? Nope. An important note about buffering poses is that if you want, you can. There is no restriction about pasting frames outside the scope of your animation. So, for example, I can store this frame here or even there. Modify the pose, insert a keyframe and replacing the current frame, and still have my old frame saved outside the scope of my animation that I can move back in with G, exactly like Bones or Ike. You move stuff with G. So you can buffer an infinite amount of poses in the negative values, or in the positive values, really. What frame rate should we be using? I never touched the frame rate, left it to default 60. I heard a second. I always left it at the default 60 and never had any problems. So I recommend you leave it at the default 60. With the 60 FPS, I had all my animation play at the same speed in Blender and in Second Life. Okay, so that was pose buffering. Pose buffering can also be used, as I said, to hold a state a little bit longer. A side note on pose buffering is inserting thing in a different movement. So let's say I have the spray thing here, and I want to insert a hiccup. So I already have my hiccup here. Let's just insert it right there. And so I want him to do a slight hiccup. To do that, the common way, the default way, would be to take a frame, have your pony slightly hiccup here. However, it will modify the interpolation toward this frame and then this one. So you won't have a hiccup. You will have a slightly modified animation. What you want to do is take the beginning of your hiccup in your normal animation, key it, the end of your hiccup, let's say here, key that, and then inside the scope of those two borders, do your slight modification. Okay. Now for the big chapter. Okay, so that's all for pose buffering and its uses. Now let's talk about rotation and quaternions. So, rotations in Blender are handled with quaternions. But before delving deep into quaternions and how we can't comprehend them because they are a higher state of being, let's talk about the different options you have regarding rotation. So here you can see that I'm rotating around an active element, which can be useful, but let's say I want to raise a hoof here. I want to raise it along an arc. I don't want to have to raise it a little, then move it, restrict it to the plane here, and then have my computer compute this. What we'll do, let me just remove all the MISC keyframes. So what we'll do is use our virtual cursor here. So how to do this? When you shift right click, you move the 3D cursor with a raycast. Okay, so let's set it at the shoulder. You can also move the 3D cursor using its using the View tab here of your side menu to adjust its location by either editing it or holding the value and modifying it. The pony is very small in Blender scale, so I recommend always using Shift when you modify the value to slide it better and with more precision. The 3D cursor also have a rotation, but we won't be using this. So we put our 3D cursor at the shoulder. Then here, next to the global thingy you see, we click the transform pivot point and set it to 3D cursor. And so now when you hit rotation, you can see the pivot point will be the cursor. And you can rotate around the cursor and have a normal shoulder movement. The other two, for the other dynamic, active element will rotate. So when you group select, so let's say I'm holding Shift and selecting all my yellow eye keys, you can see the last one I selected is more yellow. That's because it's my active element. When I click another one, it will switch. Whoops! It will switch active element. If I want to remove something from my Shift select, you have to make it the active element, then deselect it. Okay, and so when I want to, if I want to, my pivot point is my active element, everything will rotate around the active element. Okay, if my pivot point is the median point, it will rotate around the median point of all the selected elements. And finally, if it's individual origin, it will do jack shit. Okay, that's for rotation and origin points. Now, is there any question? Any question? I think it's okay. Moving on. So, quaternions. Big, scary, four-dimensional mathematical objects. Why do you care about the complex map behind it? Truth is, you don't. The computer cares for you. They are easy to combine and sensitive to rotation direction. The two things you should know about quaternions is that they prevent gimbal lock, meaning that here, if I rotate my monk in XYZ rotation, you can see that my X rotation and my V rotation are superimposed, and I lose an axis of liberty. It's what we call gimbal lock. And quaternion avoids that. So all your rotation will be designated by a quaternion, but the other important point of quaternions is that they're sensitive to the direction of rotation. So what does that mean? Here's my demo action. So here is a pony that spins. Right. But as you can see, it's missing the last frame of its spin. So here you have two options to insert that last frame. Either you select all the yellow I keys get on the frame of rotation and then, sorry, it's a fatigue, and then rotate it to its position. I don't know what origin of rotation I put, maybe the flanks, or maybe a 3D cursor. Yeah, that seems good. Okay, copy pose, get to the last, paste pose, insert keyframe, location and rotation, and everything is good. The other option, and more precise, that you may be tempted, is duplicating your original keyframe. And so it shouldn't be a problem, right? You've duplicated the original keyframe, so the last position should be the normal position. Wrong. What it will do is this. Because it will attempt, because if you see on the graph editor here, if you look on the graph editor, so you can see the W value, for instance, here. So you have all the other values that describe nice looking arcs, right? And that go to the ending position. And you have the W of the quaternion that does the thing. Because instead of ending here, where its rotation is equivalent to the original position, but in the other way, it ends here because it's the original position. That is the same apparent rotation, but it spins all the way back to the first position. To circumvent this, what you must do is select all of your keyframed objects. Okay, Then go to item and multiply the quaternion each value by -1 by just typing star -1. You have to do this for each and every one. Because it only supports your active item in the transform menu. Any other way to do it by group? I don't remember it. So you multiply your quaternion by -1, you rekey your every one of your I key once you have modified the rotation, and everything should be minted. A note about interpolation and how it works. So as you can see here, I've also made a rotation, but instead of doing a lot of points, I've made only points each 90-degree angles, and it looks like this. So notice the hooves doing a weird motion. That is because interpolation computes the path of each of your I keys in a straight line. Meaning if we show the motion path here, you can see that it describes some kind of cube, but the attenuation of the curves makes it a rounded cube instead of making it a nice circle. I've personally found that a keyframe each 20 or 30 degree makes for a good arc. Another note is notice how the pony is slowing down at the end and accelerating at the start. That is because our interpolation is made so that everything is nice and smooth, right? But to have a spinning animation, we don't want something smoothed out from the previous acceleration. What we want is something that has a linear speed. So what we do is select everything, select all the keyframes by their summary, and then we go to interpolation mode and hit linear. And so now the interpolation is linear between all our keyframes. And the speed is constant. So you may want to, for example, get back to interpolation mode Bezier for the middle ones. And just have the side ones interpolated linearly. But that's fine-tuning. Can you use circular interpolation? I can. It depends the amount of eldritch we want to inject into our animation. So for our reference, circular interpolation looks like this. So just by the graph, you can see that weird shit will happen. And it looks like this. Oh hey! Oh, I don't have all of them selected. Let's enter Eldritch mode. There we go, nice graph. Look at this graph. Great, not nightmare for you at all. Right. I am so lost. Okay, so let's move on. So that was rotation and quaternions. Now some miscellaneous things. So the rig sliders. So I didn't mention it so far. However, you can see that the rig has sliders around here. So bone translation you shouldn't touch. Cell shade is to activate or not the cell shade. So all of those are pretty explicit. IK parent to origin. So remember when I mentioned the Avestor origin bone? Moving this slider with the move, like an object, to on will make the origin parent the IKs off, and the origin will be independent. Those one modifies the behavior of the leg IK, so you can have this system. That's weird. I prefer this system. You have much more control. And this does the same, but for the front hooves. Going to FK removes your IK in order to. It lets you move the pose more precisely by using the bones. However, you won't have the advantage of having the coherent motion that IKs bring you. And the head, having the head IK on 1, so you can see when the head IK is on 2, the head is controlling the upper body. On 1, the head is only controlling up to the neck, and the rotation of your hips controls the upper body. And then you tell me I was still on the slide. Okay, everything's good. So that is the sliders. Something to mention about the slider and this rig in particular. If you're using those specific types of IKs here, note that there are not, even if there is this little arrow here, they are not under any constraint, meaning that you can rotate them around not the correct axis. If you want to avoid that, always rotate them by local x-axis. Local because if you, let's say, move the hoof here, it's no longer the global x that is the correct motion, but the local x-axis. Okay. So this was the pony rig. Alpha, can you animate sliders to change rig behavior mid-animation? You can. Don't do it, because it means that you have to key those IKs for the beginning of your animation, and then key those to be coherent. Those to be coherent with the end and the last position of your previous IKs. The only use you're going to have out of keying those arrows, first thing first, you should dekey those when you export your animation. You should. it shouldn't break your animation, but it could. So dekey them. Second things, you can key them for the changing action. Remember that changing an action will leave everything in its position if it's not keyed. So if you have at least one keyframe if you have at least one keyframe here that tell it that it should be in the sorry, I'm being retarded. Here, if you have at least one keyframe that tell it should be in the shoulder position, that means when you switch, for example, an animation, move it and switch back, it will stay in the position. It will also mean that if you change it and move your slider, it will default to its position. Moving on. Those are not tricks per se, but are some miscellaneous errors that I chanced upon and that I will share with you so you can learn from my mistakes. So, so this one did it already. Oh yeah, if at any point if at any point you hit whole body, if at any point you hit the whole body while setting up your keyframes, so keyframe whole character, you have a very high chance of having corrupted your action. So if you can, you should undo. If you cannot, you must create a new pose, not as your current one as a basis, but with the T pose as a basis. Create a new pose, and then go to your previous pose and copy not all the keyframes, but copy all the poses. So meaning you will go to each keyframe, copy the pose, go to your new action, paste the pose. Because your action will be corrupted if you hit whole body. My rig is an object, yeah. So if at any point your rig looks like this, and you can only select it, and when you select it, take everything, just have any part of your rig selected, so every part of your rig selected, and go back to pose mode. If your Blender crashes, it happens. Or if you close the project and hit not save, do not panic. Blender does have an autosave. You just go to File, Recover, and Autosave. Also, as a satellite remark, the wing bones here are for the Pegasus, right? For the Pegasus wings. even if the bat's wings are included in this kit, they will be misaligned with the animation of the Pegasus wing. It's not a critical problem, but if you're making precision animations, it will become problematic. So to have the correct alignment, you should use the bat-specific kit for the wing animations. Also, don't panic, the bones may look different in the bat kit. It's normal. They just look different. They act the same. Also, from what I recall, the bat kit doesn't have the new leg IK or the new shoulder IK. So there's that difference, but if you're using the bat kit, it's mostly for doing wing animation because the bat behaves normally with the normal rig. So let me check my notes for everything I forgot. Oh yeah, and another thing, it's not an error per se, it's more a guideline that you should really follow. But every bone that looks like this, it's more little in the face. So every bones that look like an arrow is a bone that you probably shouldn't translate. It's a bone that's there for being rotated. Now it's a guideline. You can make the most impressive jaw drop in the history of Popens. But those little arrow bones should be rotated. Okay, is there any questions? Okay, so now we know how to use a rig, how to do different tricks to animate. But what you need to do now is make an animation look good. Maybe. Probably. You probably want to make good animations. So here's the 2 tips, well, more 2.5 tips, but the 2 tips that I have. One, use references. If you want to make an animation of a horse that pounces, look at pounce videos. If you want to make the animation of horses that kicks, look at horses that kicks video. Use references. It will shave hours of your workload. Second piece of advice is pay attention to useless limbs. So for example, in the hoof raise, if you want to make an animation that raises a hoof, you may be tempted just to animate the hoof and call it a day. However, you don't account for your pony breathing, so you may want to have a slight breathing. You don't account for how the pony will balance more on the other 3 hooves, meaning you probably want to modify the IK to symbolize the load bearing slightly, and things like that. Those little details will enhance your animation and make it look way more natural and way less robotic. Another advice that I can give is use rotation around 3D cursors and rotation in general, because natural bodies works with rotations, not translations. But this is contained in the use reference advice. And finally, questions. So if you have any satellite questions or question that doesn't fit into any categories, ask them now. Any way to import default wing position? Good question. Let me get back to Blender. Good question. From the other default things, wing flap maybe. Oh yeah, wing stay. So the two wing stay animations. You got wing stay R and wing stay L. Whatever for wing stay here. You got wing stay R. If it's not compliant, do it yourself. Copy pose. Take the other bones. Here. And copy X flipped. There. You have two wings in the default position. You select them both. Copy pose. And you go to your animation. So they should stay the same because they are not keyed in your animation. But if you are still key in animation, copy pose, and then you insert rotation and location. RW -1 to rotate the quaternion axis. So yellow horse, quaternions are actually 4-dimensional, and the real part of a quaternion, the W part, doesn't exist in the 3-dimensional plane. So even if we use a 3D hyperplane, the W doesn't exist. Well, not in the sense we can comprehend it. It would be like rotating two circles perpendicularly, orthogonally, whatever, which cannot really be conceived by the human brain. You can look at it like a stereographic projection, but it's more like me rambling about math at this point. The thing is, no, the W doesn't exist in 3D, so you can't rotate the quaternion around the. You can't rotate the quaternion like that. The most you can do is make the rotation in 3D and have the computer count for you the quaternion. If you want to make custom quaternions, I can explain to you the principle of it all more in detail if you want, but it's a very mathematic way to look at rotations. Export into thirds, image the rest of the body T-pose. It seems to be of course, because you keyed, because you started from the T-pose. So I'm going to read out. Sorry. So you export a simple head turn animation, and it makes the whole rest of the body T-pose. Wait a minute. Clarify your problem. Does it make it T-pose like the pony T-pose, or T-pose like a weird human T-pose imprinted on a pony? because those are two distinct problems that have exactly the opposite kind of resolution. Pony T-pose. Okay, so for the Pony T-pose problem is that the Pony T-pose problem is because you started your animation from the T-pose. So all your bones, your body bones, are keyed. They have at least one keyframe, meaning that your head turn will take priority over your idle animation. To fix that, what you can do is either layer it as an idle with the briefing during your head turn, or you dekey all the eye keys, all the bones, and only keys. Let me show you. So what you do, you dekey all the eye key and bones. So here's the head eye key, the hips. You delete all the keyframes, and what you do is bring up the torso bones, and oh yeah, you must also delete all the keyframes in the legs, torso, arms, and that's mostly it. You must delete also all those all the keyframe in those. You can just like box select everything, go in your outline, and hit Control A and delete. Then once you have everything dekeyed, you move only the neck and the head bone to your liking. So then your animation will only have the neck and the head counted, and not the whole body stuck, while only the head and the neck can move. Can you explain actions again? Yes, I can. Let me bring up the relevant part of the script to make sure I don't repeat something you didn't understand. Okay. So actions are individual animations that will appear in your dope sheet and your graph editor. The things you have to know about action is that you need to create a new one from the T-pose, basically clicking new action, renaming whatever, and clicking the fake user. So this is step one. Then you can find the action here by clicking the button on the left of the typing area and typing the name. And that's basically it. You set up a new action. You can modify the end frame here, or even set up a value, and the start frame here. So for example, if you have a loop from 60 to 160, you can visualize only the loop. Then remember to bring it back to 0 to export your animation. And that's basically the in and out of poses. The trick about poses is that switching a pose is like displacing your timeline indicator. That means that when you switch, thank God for autosave. Yeah. So when you switch a pose, for example, this pose bring my hip and head backward. If I switch to my raise hoof, which doesn't have a keyframe on hips and head, the hips and head will stay in position, but all the other keyed things will move. which will result in this. To circumvent that, you can always go back to the T-pose before switching to another action. Anything unclear? So action are sub-animations. They're more like animation at all, but yeah. No. Animation are your actions are your animations. Each individual action is an animation that you can export. Each of your individual action is an animation. You see when we go to the export menu here, you're exporting the action here as an animation. If you switch to this, you're exporting this as an animation. So each of your action represent one of your animations. In engine without exporting, yes, Yellow Horse, there is a way to test your animation in engine without giving Linden Labs big bucks. So to do that, there is a test grid in addition to the main grid of Second Life that you can request access to by sending a ticket to the support. Let me pull up the link. Second Life access to AABC. Because you can also export your animation as BVH. However, the pony avatar works. The animation can slightly break when exported, not in .anim. I'm having trouble finding the link, and you. Minus 300. Yeah. I wish I knew about the additive test grid before myself. There we go. There. There's a process to access the test grid in which you can test stuff. So the advantage of the test grid is that the test grid will dump on you 5K Linden dollars that you can only use in the test grid, and you can upload your meshes and thingies by you can upload your meshes and different things to test them on the test grid. Any other questions? Is there a way to enable IK on an existing FK pose without resetting skeleton? So what you can do is turn on your bones, copy the pose, okay? Turn on IK, delete all the keyframe in the IK bones, and then paste your pose. However, the caveat of this, yeah. So as I mentioned, when you move bones independently from their IK, the IK will lock to the new bone formation. So as you moved all the bones, if you want to enable IK, you will have your limb folded with the IK. I don't know if copying and pasting poses will help with that. Yeah, but the fact is that they will be folded independently from your IK. What I mean is that your for example, your hoof will. Whoops. If your hoof is slightly folded, then your IK does not correspond to your hoof anymore. Or if I dislocate the shoulder a bit, here, my IK is not coherent with my bone anymore. So you can still move it, but it's not representative. If that's a satisfying outcome for you, what you have to do is just so we start with IK turned off. So you have your bone modified. What you do is select all your relevant bone, copy the pose, turn on IK, and you paste the pose on all of your bones, and you delete all keyframe on all IKs. And it should work. Also specifying IK mechanic in the other starboard menu. Okay, so I don't see any question. So I'm going to wrap this up. So this was the course on animating ponies. Oh. Yeah, I didn't manage to. Yeah, I didn't fiddle a lot with FK poses. I mainly did IK and slightly modified the bone group when I needed to. But sorry, I don't have the experience to tell you. Yes, that's of course of how FK works, because I didn't really do FK so far. Anyway, So this wraps up our animation class basics. So now you should have all the basics and some tricks to help you make the puppet animation of your dream. I hope I wasn't too boring or used too much of your attention span, and that you managed to follow along decently well.